It began with a blast that shattered the calm of a summer afternoon. At 3:25 p.m. on July 22, 2011, the heart of Oslo, Norway's quiet, orderly capital, was torn open by a massive explosion. Windows burst for blocks, cars flipped, and the air filled with smoke and dust. People stumbled through the chaos, dazed and bloodied, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The target was clear: the government quarter, home to the offices of Norway's prime minister. Within minutes, the city that had always seemed so safe was plunged into terror. As sirens screamed across Oslo, emergency responders raced toward the smoking ruins. 7 people were dead, many more injured, and buildings lay in twisted wreckage. At first, many assumed it was the work of international terrorists, maybe Al-Qaeda, maybe some shadowy group striking at Western Europe. Norway, after all, wasn't used to this kind of violence, but even as the media speculated and police tried to make sense of the destruction, something far more horrifying was already unfolding an hour away on a small island called Utøya. Utøya sat peacefully in the Tyrifjorden Lake, about 40 kilometers northwest of Oslo. It was a quiet, wooded island used by the Norwegian Labour Party for its annual youth camp, a place where teenagers and young adults gathered to discuss politics, make friends, and enjoy the summer. That day, around 600 young people were there, relaxing in the warm afternoon air. Many had heard about the explosion in Oslo through their phones. They were anxious, but still thought they were safe. Then, just after 5 p.m., a man dressed in a police uniform stepped off a ferry onto the island. He introduced himself calmly, claiming to be there for security reasons after the Oslo bombing. He carried a large black rifle and a pistol, both visible but not alarming. After all, a police officer might need them. But minutes later, without warning, he began to shoot. The man's name was Anders Behring Breivik. 32 years old. Clean-cut and polite in appearance, he was anything but what he seemed. Behind the neat uniform and measured tone was a mind consumed by hatred. He saw himself as a crusader, a self-declared warrior against what he called the Islamization of Europe. In his twisted ideology, the Labour Party and its supporters were traitors, people who had opened Norway's doors to immigration and multiculturalism. In his mind, killing them wasn't murder. It was war. The first shots echoed across the island like fireworks, but they weren't fireworks. Campers near the main building fell instantly. Panic spread as dozens of teenagers began to run in all directions. Breivik moved with cold precision, reloading calmly, shooting anyone in sight. He didn't shout, didn't taunt. He just methodically fired one after another as if he were on a mission. Many thought he was a second attacker sent to protect them after Oslo. Some ran toward him for safety. They didn't get far. Calls flooded the police lines. Survivors hid under beds, behind rocks, in the woods. Others jumped into the lake, trying to swim away even as bullets ripped through the water around them. On the mainland, officers struggled to organize a response. The Oslo bombing had already stretched resources thin, and confusion reigned. Helicopters weren't immediately available, and communication lines were jammed. Every passing minute on Utøya meant more lives lost. At 6:25 p.m., more than an hour after the first shot, police finally reached the island. By then, Breivik had killed 69 people, most of them teenagers. Some were as young as 14. He surrendered without a fight, calmly setting down his weapons and identifying himself by name. When asked why he did it, he said, "It was gruesome, but necessary." The investigation that followed revealed a plan both chilling and meticulous. Breivik had spent years preparing. He rented a farm under a false company name and used it as cover to purchase large quantities of fertilizer, enough to make a powerful bomb. He had studied police uniforms, official insignias, and even body armor to create an authentic disguise. His manifesto, a 1,500-page document titled 2083, a European Declaration of Independence, had been emailed to hundreds of people just hours before the attacks. In it, he called for a violent uprising against Muslims and liberals, painting himself as a modern-day knight in a self-imagined holy war. The more investigators learned, the more disturbing it became. He had acted entirely alone. No foreign group, no underground network, just one man, isolated and delusional, convinced he was saving his country. He had rehearsed the bombing, built his weapons, and planned every step with precision. In a world where terror often came from hidden networks, this was a new kind of nightmare, homegrown, ideological, and terrifyingly personal. For Norway, a country of just over 5 million people, the loss was beyond comprehension. Families waited in hospitals and police stations, clinging to hope that their sons and daughters were still alive. Survivors described the sound of gunfire, the screams, the smell of blood and gunpowder. One girl recalled hiding under a dead friend's body for over an hour, pretending to be lifeless as Breivik walked past her. Another swam for her life through the cold, dark water, hearing bullets hit the surface behind her. When news broke that the killer was Norwegian, not a foreign terrorist, the shock deepened. Norway's Prime Minister, Jens Stoltenberg, called it a national tragedy. In a speech that night, he said, "We are shocked, but we will never give up our values. Our answer is more democracy, more openness, but never naivety." His words became a symbol of defiance, a refusal to let hatred redefine what Norway stood for. The trial began in 2012 and quickly became one of the most closely watched in European history. Breivik showed no remorse. He smiled at times, delivered Nazi-style salutes, and described his victims as legitimate targets. The court allowed him to speak at length, and he used the platform to promote his extremist beliefs, infuriating victims' families. Psychiatrists debated whether he was insane or simply evil. Ultimately, the court ruled that he was sane and fully responsible for his actions. He was sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum allowed under Norwegian law, with the possibility of indefinite extension if he, SD, still deemed dangerous. Effectively, it was a life sentence. But for many, justice felt incomplete. How could any sentence account for the lives lost, the families destroyed, the innocence stolen? Survivors struggled with trauma that words could barely describe. Some couldn't sleep for months. Others couldn't return to school. The island of Utøya became both a memorial and a scar, a place of unimaginable grief and quiet strength. In the years that followed, Norway tried to heal. Memorials were built, stories were shared, and survivors turned their pain into activism. Many of them, once teenagers discussing politics at a camp, grew up to become public voices for tolerance, inclusion, and democracy. They refused to let Breivik's hate define their generation. Every July 22nd, the country gathers to remember not just the victims but the values attacked that day: freedom, compassion, and unity. Behind bars, Breivik remains a haunting figure. He has filed lawsuits over his prison conditions, claiming his isolation violates human rights. The irony is staggering. A man who silenced so many now demanding fairness. His cell includes a desk, a bed, and even a computer for limited use, leading to public outrage. But Norway's justice system stands by its principles. It refuses to mirror his cruelty. The true horror of July 22nd lies not just in the death toll, but in what it revealed, that even in peaceful societies, hatred can grow quietly, invisibly, until it erupts in unthinkable ways. Breivik wanted to divide Norway, to make people afraid of one another. Instead, he united them in grief and resolve. Years later, survivors still carry the memories, the screams, the running, the helplessness, but they also carry something else: strength. One survivor, who was shot in the shoulder but lived, said in an interview, "He wanted us to hate, but we chose love instead." The Oslo and Utøya attacks stand as one of the darkest chapters in modern European history, a reminder that evil doesn't always come from distant lands or faceless groups. Sometimes it wears the face of someone who looks just like us. And in the echo of that summer day, beneath the silence of the rebuilt streets and the calm waters of Tyrifjorden, the ghosts of July 22nd still whisper one truth, that the price of peace is never to forget. If stories like this keep you hooked, hit subscribe for more.